The Qassam Brigades, the military wing of the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas, announced on Thursday a breach of the separation fence with Israel, coupled with the killing of 5 Israeli soldiers in another operation in Rafah. In a bold maneuver, the Qassam executed a landing operation behind enemy lines, breaching the fence and targeting the headquarters of the enemy division operating in the city of Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip, according to a brief statement from Qassam. This announcement follows earlier admissions by Israeli forces of casualties resulting from Palestinian resistance operations in Rafah. The Israeli army confirmed the death of 1 soldier and injuries to others during an attempt by Palestinians to infiltrate the Kerem Shalom area east of Rafah. Additionally, the Qassam Brigades reported the killing of 5 Israeli soldiers after detonating a tunnel west of Rafah. The developments coincide with reports of the Israeli army reducing its forces in Rafah, with the Basalma Brigade departing the area while 5 brigades remain stationed in the city. These recent events underscore the ongoing tensions and violence in the region, with both sides engaging in deadly confrontations amid the long-standing conflict between Israel and Hamas. The breach of the separation fence and the resulting casualties further exacerbate the already volatile situation, raising concerns about the escalation of hostilities and the potential for further bloodshed in the region. Since May 6, the Israeli military has launched a ground offensive on Rafah, forcing more than 1 million displaced Palestinians to relocate under catastrophic conditions. The Israel Broadcasting Corporation said the army expects its main tasks in Rafah to be completed by the end of June, explaining that these tasks include the dismantling of the last Hamas brigade and the destruction of tunnels along the Philadelphia, that is Salah al-Din border access with Egypt. The operation came as heavy clashes were raging across Rafah a month after Israel launched its brutal assault on the city. The Qassam Brigades announced earlier on Thursday that its fighters detonated a booby-trapped tunnel entrance near a group of 5 soldiers west of the southern city, effectively eliminating them. Israel took over Rafah border crossing on 7th May and has since been pushing troops into the city under violent bombardment, defying repeated international warnings and displacing around 1 million Palestinians. Several Israeli attacks on tents near Rafah and where Palestinians fled from Rafah have resulted in dozens of civilian deaths. Tel Aviv had been saying before it launched the operation that Rafah was Hamas's final stronghold. Yet the group's armed wing remains entrenched across the Gaza Strip along with other factions that continue to target Israeli forces in daily operations.
انتصارا لمظلومية الشعب الفلسطيني وردا على مجزرة مخيم النصيرات في قطاع غزة يوم أمس. نفذت القوة الصاروخية عملية عسكرية استهدفت المدمرة الحربية البريطانية دايمون في البحر الأحمر، وذلك بعدد من الصواريخ البالستية، وكانت الإصابة دقيقة بفضل الله.
A surge of attacks from Yemen's Iranian-backed Houthi rebels on ships traveling through the Red Sea continues to disrupt the global supply chain. Since November, Houthi rebels have launched more than 50 attacks on international shipping lanes in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden in response to Israel's war with Hamas. The U.S. and other countries are defending the area, but the attacks have not stopped. U.S. officials say those attacks and the threat of them are driving U.S. prices and causing delivery delays for critical humanitarian items such as food and medicine in places where it's needed most. CBS News reporter Zach Hudak has been looking into this for me. Sorry, Zach. Let's start with how these attacks are affecting the global supply chain.
John, 30% of the global container trade goes through the Red Sea and then through the Suez Canal. You have to get through the Red Sea to get to the Suez Canal. And since the 19th century, the Suez Canal has been basically a shortcut to get from Asia over to Europe and to North America without having to loop the entire way south around Africa. The result of these attacks is that we're seeing a 50% decline in the traffic of these ships going through the Red Sea, going through the Suez Canal, and instead looping the entire way around the Cape of Good Hope and then the whole way back up north to Europe or up north and across the ocean to North America.
And so how is this affecting just regular old Americans?
Well, the most direct result is it costs more to do these shipments. These shipping companies are paying more in wages because the journey takes 2 to 4 weeks longer, paying much more in fuel because it's about 4,500 nautical miles longer than it would be otherwise. And those costs are passed on to consumers when they go and buy goods. What's most remarkable here, though, is that these drones being used are not the ultra-advanced Reaper drones we hear about the U.S. military conducting these complex strikes with.
And these are the drones being used by the Houthis
Yes.
against these ships with the big U.S. military there, picking them off. You know, they're causing mayhem with these drones you're talking about.
And they're using them basically as suicide drones. They're like the modern-day suicide bomber, just there's no pilot who has to die. They're just flying them into these ships. So it's, in some ways, a primitive operation. But the result is that they are deterring these ships from going through this sea. And as a result, they are effectively imposing economic sanctions on European countries, on the United States. And they are not even an official government, and they are managing to do this.
So your point is that even if they're not hitting specific ships, nobody wants business with these suicide drones. So I'm just not going to hang out in the area.
That's exactly right. And I talked to a professor earlier today at UMass Amherst who studies the supply chain, has been following this really closely, has been consulting with some of these shipping companies. One of the biggest costs they're facing is the increase in insurance because of the increased risk. It just costs them more the second they send a boat onto the waters.
So now, as a final question, what's the end game in this, or does this end?
The Houthis claim that this is an act of backing Gaza. They're doing this to hurt the allies of Israel as the Israel-Hamas war wages on. But I spoke with Thomas Juneau at the University of Ottawa earlier today. He's studied the Houthis for a long time, and he predicts that that would not bring an end to it. He says that, in fact, the Israel-Hamas war was a pretext for these attacks in the Red Sea, and that even if there's a ceasefire or something like that, and there's a temporary pause to the attacks, the Houthis, based on everything he's studied, would have no reason to keep that pause going. They will eventually find another excuse to start these attacks again and get the world looking at them. And hopefully, he says, their final goal is to become the internationally recognized government of Yemen. That's what they want in the long run. So it doesn't really matter what happens in Israel.
Right, a temporary problem that's going to be maybe a long-term problem. Zach Hudak, thank you so much, Zach.
Thank
really
you, John.
appreciate it.